Doherty.
Here.
Vice Chair Murphy.
Here.
Mr. Roach.
Here.
Mrs. Smith. Here. Chairman Smith.
Here.
Let the record show that Town Manager Dunham and Town Attorney Nazaro and myself were also present.
Thank you. You did receive a drop-off of the minutes of the meeting we had last Thursday. Hope you had a chance to read them. Does anybody have any comments, corrections, deletions to those minutes?
Yeah, I have a point on page 5. It was when Mr. Stanton presented and he said that the eyebrow was the variance, and we just confirmed that it wasn't. It's the actual setback that's the variance, and it's not referenced in the first paragraph. Reference that you made the point that it doesn't have the factor language. That's for the confirmation. It's on
the first paragraph.
Yeah, 4 lines down.
Mr. Stanton stated.
Yep. It was just when we had our discussion, just to confirm what the variance referenced. Apart from that,
It's the setback on the second floor.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, could I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Rita?
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy.
Yes.
Mr. Roach.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith. Yes. Chairman Smith.
Yes. We'll now move to the public hearing portion of the meeting. Does anyone have any declaration of ex parte communication? No. I did meet earlier this week with the town manager and the town attorney, just to go over the same 8 points that we're going to discuss later today.
And that is not considered an ex parte
Okay.
communication, just so we're all here.
Rita, would you administer the oath to anyone who's going to speak today? Probably all 3 gentlemen in the third row.
You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. This is a special meeting that we're having today, really to continue our discussion from last Thursday, and I think we want to narrow the scope of what we're going to discuss to really deal with the 8 points that we need to consider for a variance. They were in something that looks like this that we had from the last meeting, if you had those. I think we asked you to have someone come back today and maybe address those points. And I would like to maybe, as we go through each one of them, not have you do all 8 and then we discuss them. Maybe we can discuss each point as we go to see if we've got agreement or disagreement on it. Greg, correct me, we technically are supposed to meet all, they're supposed to meet all 8 points?
Yes, sir.
For it to be, okay. Thank you. Are you going to come, would you please come up and introduce yourself?
Certainly. Morning, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Roger Randine, for the record. I'm with the Office of Justin Bowen. We were engaged to just provide some justification as to the need for the variance on the subject site. So, per your direction, we can just go straight into the standards, the criteria for the variance request. The subject section of code that we're dealing with today is section 7073, and that section requires, and I emphasize on new construction of a second floor for a single family within the Place au Soleil zoning district shall include an additional side setback for the second story portion of the building. The second story shall be set back from each first story elevation a minimum of 15% of the width of the first story of the house. So I want to emphasize on new construction. Looking back at the code when it was written, it's my opinion that new construction in the traditional sense is the new construction of a new home. What we have here is a renovation and an addition to an existing home. So keep in mind that the reason for the variance is because we need to utilize the structural integrity of that first floor elevation, that first floor facade, to support the second floor. Had this been a new construction situation, that second floor could have been accommodated with structural support on the first floor. So in the traditional sense, new construction, in my opinion, in this case, would be the new construction of a brand new home designed to support a second floor with the needed setback. With that said, we can move on to the actual standards. And standard 1 says, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved and which are not applicable to the other lands, structure, structures or buildings in the same zoning district. So again, I go back to the special circumstance being the existing building and the need to utilize that first floor structural wall to support that second floor component. The building was designed so that, the home was designed so that it doesn't necessarily have the look of one planar wall going straight up. It's really the break in the wall was accommodated with the eyebrow to give the illusion of the setback. So even though it's set back a very small amount, we had to design it that way in order to utilize that structural support of the first floor. So that's the special circumstance that exists with the building today. Special circumstances, and did you want to discuss each one? That's the direction.
Yes.
Yes. I'm happy to answer any questions related
So,
to.
are you saying that that was the only place to put that second story wall?
I would defer to the architect and the building design, the engineers that would have drawn up the site plans, but yes, it's my understanding that we need to utilize that first floor wall structurally to support the second floor component. If we don't utilize that first floor and have to meet that setback, there would have to be improvements on the inside of the home to support the second floor component. Load-bearing walls directly below where that second floor wall would
But
go
it
up.
can be done.
It's basically going to defeat the purpose of keeping the structure as it currently exists there. The reason that we went that route is the load-bearing walls underneath were currently existing. And by placing our second floor wall on top of the first floor, by simply fortifying the footing underneath this, actually I can show it to you on the plan as well. By fortifying simply the footers under this, it superimposes load and it will take care of it. Now, if the first floor wall is in here and second floor is back in here, being the fact now you're underneath of it, you're air, there's nothing existing, then we have to majorly modify the existing structure, which actually negates keeping the first wall. Then we don't need the first wall. And that will, as I explained in our last meeting, will change the front. If I could bring up the elevations, that would be great on the slideshow. It will shift the entire house. First of all, the first floor totally has to go. The existing house has to go because we can't use it. And then the entire second floor, go back to the floor plan. One more, yeah. Yeah, one more. There you go. Right now, the wall that we are talking about is approximately from there to here. And that falls on top of this existing wall that we are keeping to carry the load. And you see how the fenestration, how it comes up in and out, is symmetrical based on keeping this wall and keeping the rest of the existing structure on the exterior to keep that elevation. Now, if this wall for the second floor was not going to be here and was going to be here, so as you see, all of this that we have on this side has to go, and being the fact that it's going to be back here, all of this front elevation now has to shift over. This is currently right on the same axis as the current landscaping of the island as you approach the house. So it has a lot of savings factor. It has construction saving factor. It has look, which is basically keeping the perimeter of the existing house to help us to do this new elevation. And also it keeps our landscaping that are already here, and there are pretty lush landscaping when we just don't want to just yank them out and redo all of that. Now, last meeting that we were here, if you could go back, I forgot to mention something, I thought maybe, that's good. Yeah, that's great. Our setback line is this dotted line, the standard setback line for any new construction, is this dotted line that comes down here. So our second floor, as you see, it starts from 20 some odd feet back, and the other corner of it almost 40 to 50 some odd feet back. So we are not right on the setback line, we are actually skewed to the setback line. So as you come toward the front of the house, the setback to the actual property line becomes much, much wider than the actual setback that you need. So we have this amount, which is almost double the space as a setback line in the front, and in the back, whatever that's, I'm sorry, I can't read that, but it is like 3 or 4 feet more than what the actual code requires. Now, you asked me to do a superimposed rendering of the landscaping on this facade as you look at it, and this facade. I have this facade, I have this facade, I actually have this facade too. I brought a copy of it. There's 6 copies of them here, so if you do me a favor and pass them around, you see how heavily that side of the building is landscaped, and by the time that you are done, you barely can see anything of the 2-story portion of the house. I'm referring to the front view, would be the upper illustration, and the second illustration in the middle is from the neighbor's side on the east side. As you see, all of those existing trees, it kind of hide the entire structure.
So what I'm understanding is that
Thank you for
it could be built a different way, but due to cost and ease of build.
Exactly,
you choose to
exactly.
do it this way.
We have talked to build this, actually to 3 builders, and the saving factor of using what we are using correctly, especially main house that Mr. Stanton right now lives in, which is what we are discussing, is anywhere from $350,000, $400,000 to $550,000, $600,000 saving based on which builder we talk to. So there is substantial saving because not only we are saving the walls, we are also saving the slab. And some of the plumbing we have situated in a manner that we are within a couple of feet of it, which the repair of it is going to be, and reuse of it is going to be much easier than if we were dealing with a brand new floor plan, which everything had to be yanked out.
Can I just check something? My memory's going. You mentioned it's a renovation.
Yes, yes, extensively.
If the renovation is greater than 50% of the existing floor plan, doesn't the whole building have to meet the code? And I thought there was
I
some
was going to
reference.
ask the same thing.
There
What
was a
does our
reference-
code
yeah.
describe new construction versus renovations?
Sorry to put you on the spot, Trey.
No, sure, they would need to update it, if there were any existing non-conformities, they would need to be brought into conformity.
If it's
I
over
don't-
the 50%.
That's correct. I don't know if there are any existing non-conformities on either lot that don't meet the code, we're really just considering this addition.
If I can add, I'm not an attorney, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, I'm a land planner, I've been doing this for 15 years in the public sector, with experience in Martin County and Palm Beach County, and yes, the attorney is correct. When it comes to non-conformities, that's, if you exceed the 50% threshold, the cost of the improvement, typically code requires you to bring the entire structure up to code.
Right.
It's my understanding there are no non-conformities on this property, everything is conforming. So all we're seeking here is relief due to an existing condition. We're not creating a non-conformity, we're just seeking relief from an existing code section that may have been written in the past, again, going back to the new construction language, to address new homes being constructed. And again, I'm not an engineer, but my understanding of the cost to push that wall back what they would have to do is excavate a portion of the interior floor to install footers to now sustain the weight of that second floor wall, and those costs can be very substantial. So that's
But
I
the
think.
costs create this special condition?
Well, the special condition that does exist here, not to bring up, again, yes, you're right, it's not to bring up the cost of the improvement.
So,
but
so
it's
cost
not
doesn't
existing.
create a special condition.
It should not be considered.
Well, if I could add in here also that the way that the code written, as we discussed also last time, the special condition come into place that this is a kind of, if you want to put it in a quotation, an irregular site. There is no site as big as this site after we combine the two exist. So when you're talking about the normal sites in the Place of Soleil, there are half this size. So by the virtue of the fact that it's two sites, by the virtue of the fact there are two different structures on this site, by the virtue of the fact that we wanted to combine the first floor of these two and not changing the setback, and as I pointed out, the setbacks are more than generous when it comes to it. So it creates a special condition based on the specialty of the site being such a larger site with the two buildings on it that we are connecting and all of that. So can it be done the way that the letter of the code reads? Yes, but that would negate for us on the Mr. Stanton's side the current residence that he's living in for that thing to totally go away, which means is we're going to incur a cost of landscaping as well on top of everything else. It's not just a structure, it's a landscaping because we have to redo the approach to the house, the driveway, redo the main entrance landscape island, all of that.
If I can add to what Hassan has explained, what we have here is a situation where we're going to have a much wider lot than is typically seen in this zoning district. And that's kind of forcing a calculation requiring a much greater setback from the first floor component. So that in itself is a hardship because now the calculation required based on the width of the lot to increase that setback is also a special condition because of the width of the lot.
Well, when you read the code, it reads, which are not applicable to other land, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district. And I think there would be other land, structures, or buildings in the zoning district that would be just as, this would be just as applicable too. So I don't think it's a special, one-of-a-kind situation in Place au Soleil. We can discuss it further. And incidentally, we realize it's a wide front, and that's making more of a step in on the, let's call it a wedding cake sort of a look. But it surely wouldn't be just an eyebrow, even if we were just dealing with the width of the existing home. It would still be a setback that would be 10 feet or 15 feet. So I don't agree with your argument on that. And in this case, it's wider than that because of the width of the house. But in any event, it wouldn't be a straight up wall with an eyebrow. Anybody else got any comments on one? You want to go to number two?
I just think that there are other alternatives. If you take cost out, cost not, it's not a special condition, so I'm having a hard time with this argument also.
I agree with you on the aspect of the cost, and again, I think the focus that I was making, the point I was making on this particular special condition and circumstance is the existing structure. We have an existing structure in place, and to redesign the entire home is substantial. It would require pretty much a demolition and a reconstruction of a new home in order to meet the intent of the code.
Before we move on, just to make sure I'm clear too, so are we arguing that this is a renovation versus a new home? Are we arguing that this is because I don't think I'm clear to the position of the board. If it's a renovation, then we're not, I know we're spending a lot of time talking about cost here, but I think we need to clarify that. If it's considered renovation versus not, then I don't think we've fully discussed if it falls within that special exception or not.
Seems to be a new build on the second floor, you're choosing to put a second story on the home, so it seems like a new build on top.
Is that consistent with prior renovations in Avenue au Soleil? Because my understanding, for example, there's one that was done recently that had some issues with the board with window, I forget what the terminology is.
Well, too much glass
Too much
on the
glass.
back and the side.
Yeah, too much glass, but that was classified as a renovation. They were adding a second floor using the existing, they added about 50% to the first floor. I mean, we're keeping virtually all of both homes first floor, and we're adding a second story. I mean, I don't understand why this would be treated differently. It's obviously not a new home.
But we did not grant a variance on that, I believe, when we had the testing done, that the glass did in fact conform to the code.
Yeah, well, I'm not referring to a variance on the home, just saying it was considered a renovation, not a new home. So this project is no different. Why would this be considered a new home versus a renovation?
I think the setback would apply whether it was a new home or a renovation.
Well, the language that Mr. Stanton and his agents are referring to is something that the town has looked over very strictly to make sure that we were interpreting it consistently and correctly. And the language is new construction of a second story. So it's not new construction of a new house. We've interpreted, staff have, not myself, but staff have interpreted it as new construction of a second story. There was no second story. Now there's new construction of a second story. So that's, I think, where we're sort of missing each other, whereas we've applied, the staff rather have applied this to the project because it is a new construction of a second story. And I think they're arguing it should not be applied at all because it's not new construction, it's a renovation. But, you know, staff have, and Rita and Greg can confirm that, they have applied that consistently as if you're adding a second story, then this would apply. And that's something that they had discussed at length, as I recall, while this project was moving through.
And I can give you an example of a house that, since I've been here, where we applied that, and that's the one that's just due south of Mr. Lyons' house. So they, single story, they came in and put an entire new second floor on it. Came through here, came through, and went through the town commission, but that's how we applied it. We applied the new code to that.
He was renovating an existing home, but putting a second floor on it.
Correct.
And.
The entire second floor.
Okay.
So the renovation applied to the first floor because it was obviously in place, but the second story didn't exist, so that's why it was
Correct.
treated as a new construction. Well, dressed as a new construction.
Now, I wasn't here when Mr. Herzog's house, the one with all the glass, came through for approvals. So I didn't know whether that was a stick-built house or,
That was holding, they tore down the old one and put up.
so it was a brand-new stick-built house.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it
Well,
was.
they had to come back because the ratio
Right,
applied to the
I
facade.
I remember that.
Yeah, they kept coming back and we got it inside the code in the end.
Right. This is a different house than I'm referring
Oh,
to.
okay.
Because this home, I watched the construction, they kept all the existing walls.
Okay, you had mentioned the one with all the glass.
Well, I mentioned Orchard and someone brought up the one, but they had a glass issue, I don't know
Okay.
specifically, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, and I think too, just to add, so this home next door, has almost $2 million in liens on it. The town's negotiated, that to be reduced, so I understand cost isn't necessarily, considered, a reason for a variance, but I think you also have to factor in that the property is worth about 25% less than what is being purchased for because of the liens on the property. In addition to that, the community, in my view, has been burdened with restrictions and challenges with solving problems like this that have resulted in pretty ridiculous circumstances. The home directly behind us and this home, I just see this home following the same path, so I don't know what's considered a special circumstance outside of cost necessarily, but you know, if I guess some of the board members live in the neighborhood, but you guys aren't burdened with the homeless drug addicts, so you maybe not understand it, but when these homes become victims of rules and unreasonableness, I think that, you know, you get to what we have today, which are vacant properties that are there for years. I mean, the home behind me has been, it's been 7, 8 years. I mean, they just fall in this trap of, lien expense that's compounding, and just makes the property, and combining that with such stringent restrictions, undevelopable. People, and it's obvious, this isn't an assumption or guess, this is a fact. Look at the homes that are part of this process. So, I think the special circumstances here are beyond cost. I think the property, the width is unique. I think that the liens that are the property that we're purchasing is burdened with is a special condition. You know, I think the fact that it's a renovation, not a new home. I don't understand the second story. I've never heard of that. We build commercial properties all over the country. I've never heard in my life that a portion of the home is new construction, but the rest is a renovation, and the codes vary based on that. Before we moved on, I just wanted to add that point, and others can agree or disagree. But I didn't want to get totally focused on cost. Cost is a component of this, and while it's not a special exception, I think it's reasonable when you have almost $2 million in fines on a property that's empty, that is likely going to be like an adjacent property. You have to factor in the reasonableness of the expense for someone to acquire that property, renovate it, and turn it into a livable space that isn't riddled with, you know, homeless people or users.
And if I can,
Homeless people and drug users, what,
I would like to comment on that. I have our lieutenant from the police department here. I think he could probably identify the number of calls that we received about drug addicts that have been in Mr. LaVoy's house. We are aware of a squatter who claimed that he was renting from 2900 who's been evicted by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department. The police did answer a call, I believe, from a surveyor who said he thought he saw someone in the house, and we went over there and checked it. They searched the house. There was no evidence that any squatters or homeless people had been in there. Old McDonald's bags, syringes, drug paraphernalia inside the house, and so.
There were not.
There were not.
Okay.
Lieutenant, I mean, have you received
No, I've
a
been to
number
the
of
house
calls
twice
regarding that?
myself, on 2 of them calls actually, and, you know, the property was unsecured, it was accessible, but there was no sign of anybody being in it. You know, now whether somebody walked through the property or not, and that was seen, you know, was unknown, but there's no signs within the resident that anybody's been there.
Well, just to add to that, the gentleman that found the person was very clear when he was serving the house, someone who was in the kitchen, and then ultimately took off and ran through the property. And then furthermore, I'm in my backyard playing tennis frequently, and I see the guys walking and riding their bike to and from the home. In fact, I looked at the home behind us to purchase.
Then you're talking about the home to the north of you now?
Well, yeah,
Not to the west.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the timeline, the west home, it's been on the market for 3 months. So imagine, or whatever it's been.
3 months.
3 or 4 months. So you just assume, and you've had 2 calls already, and the first call, the police department, thankfully, instructed my wife, I wasn't there. She told me that they said, hey, be on alert, be cautious, don't call us, call 911. These people can be a major problem for you. Don't call us, call 911 immediately.
Absolutely,
with a lot of
that's the
emphasis.
response they should give.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously there's a sense of urgency and concern, and then that's just a short window. Then you look at the home behind us, that's vacant, empty, riddled with similar issues. There's daily activity, people walking back and forth. In fact, when I looked at it several times, and I know one of the gentlemen that spoke to you guys regarding that property, but when I've even viewed the property, they've had to go in and get rid of the people that are in there to allow you to come in. And there's 100% drug paraphernalia there. There's, you know, doors locked with bolts and other things. So it's a real problem. Yeah, I don't think you can dispute that.
Okay, somehow you've been made aware of that, but our police department hasn't.
No, we've answered a few calls to the 2900 property, Mr. Stanton, if that's what
Yeah.
you're referring to. And that's when it was so-called being rented, or somebody
Right.
was there that says they had the rights to rent it or whatever. Other than that, we've had, very few calls, to people since they have been evicted and moved out to that property. Now, I'm not saying you're not seeing people maybe come out of the woods and go down the driveway, but we haven't received them calls.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to stay busy and have us call you every time we see somebody, we can do that.
That's what
Well,
you
that's
should do.
fine, and that's
Yeah.
what you're
That's what you should
instructed
do,
to,
that's why they're there.
Yeah,
so
they'll
we
be
can check
happy-
it out.
They'd be happy to call you. But anyway, the point that I'm making here is that we're talking about a special circumstance, and I think it's obvious that when you look at these two properties, one's gonna follow the path of an existing one, the other one is years of the same issue. It's nice that there's a season or moment of less activity, we'll call it, but how long is that really gonna, the solution here is not to call the police, it's to put people in the home that care about the community, that want to add to the community, not destroy it. Calling the police is just a reactionary requirement.
Let's not talk about that other property, I mean, let's talk about the property next year, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that property exactly. That property is a special circumstance, and I think I'm just referring to the adjacent property. I mean, it's not like I'm talking about across the intercoastal. It's the adjacent property, it's a neighboring property that's vacant, that's had the same issues that this property has. So it's reasonable to assume it's going to follow the same path. So if it's not a special circumstance for the town of Gulfstream to eliminate abandoned homes that have squatters and drug users, then I don't know what a special circumstance is.
I just want to try to focus our conversation as to the specific variance at issue. So the special circumstances need to relate to the variance, which is the offset of the second floor. So now, the gentleman from Stratton Bowen mentioned, the width of the lot, that lends to a wider house, which means the percentage is gonna be larger, so you're gonna need a larger setback. So I just wanna kind of focus that all the criteria are really just specific to the variance that's been requested.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Also, just so I can maybe just expand on the traditional sense of what new construction is in the field of planning and zoning, understood that the Webster's definition of new construction will be the building of something new. But when it comes to planning and zoning, when we define, and there is no definition in your code for new construction, and there shouldn't be, there is no need for it, but when we talk about new construction, we are referring to construction, vertical construction from ground up. So in the lines of planning and zoning, which is what the LDRs or your town code addresses, my opinion, again, would be that new construction would be a new home, not a renovation of an existing home. But that's why the standard one was addressed the way it was. So we can go on to number two.
Okay, let's go to number 2.
Special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. And again, this relates to the existing home and the intent to utilize the existing home to renovate and add to second floor component. So we're not looking to demolish and construct new, we're looking to renovate. So the house is existing, the applicant owns the current home, and they're just looking to expand on it. So it's not a direct result of the applicant's actions. There's an existing structure there that we're just looking to expand upon. Glad to answer any questions that you may have as it relates to standard 2.
Thank you. I mentioned in the last meeting that point 2 is really the one that I wanted to focus on. By actions, I read that as choice. Am I reading that correctly? That it's the choice of the applicant, and therefore it's a case of what are the other options if in terms of alongside this. And Mr. Stanton, you said that one of the reasons your motivations, you've got a growing family, you wanted to basically have a larger property for that reason. Is there anything you've considered on the lot itself, as I say, focusing on that lot, the construction, taking out the building next door as we've been guided? Is there any possibility that you could actually obtain what you're looking for on the existing lot? Have you considered that? choice. That's how I'm reading the actions. You know, you have certain actions, you have certain choices to even pursue this. Is there an option to develop on this side?
Here, I'll come here.
Yes.
The reality is that there is no choice. The only way to make this property work is what we've designed within all the code criteria. Our position is we feel like we're meeting the criteria. I think at the end of the day, the board has to make a decision if they agree with that or not. And I think that's kind of where everything lies. I mean, we feel like, you know, given the circumstances, that this is the only option for this property, because we don't want to demo and build a new home. It's not an option for us.
Okay, it's not an option for you, but it is an option. You see?
No, it's not an option. It's not an option because we're talking about us and our circumstance and our property that we own. We own the property. It's not an option for us to demo it and build a brand new home. It's an option for us to do a renovation and take the adjacent property and include it in that renovation, to the extent we even came into the board a secondary time after the approval to ensure that we can keep the walls of the existing the property that we're purchasing, so we can in fact do the renovation. Building a new home, combining the two lots, is not an option. We're seeking to renovate a home that we own, and take a home that's adjacent to us, include it in that renovation by renovating that same home and combining the two. Those are the options. The other option is we don't buy the adjacent home, and we sell our home, and we move.
So there are other options.
No, there's no other option as it relates to the discussion that we're having now as it relates to building this property. The property is either built as it's designed or it's not built. Those are the two options. If you're seeking an option specific to the property, it's do or don't. I mean, that's just the reality of the circumstance.
Thank you.
Number 3? Or
Yes, go ahead, please.
Granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this code of the lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district. So in this zoning district, there are several lots, not necessarily a combined lot, but there are several lots on the larger side, slightly less than 1 acre in size. It ranges from anywhere from 0.4 to almost 0.8, 0.9 acres. So in the event that a property owner wants to do something similar on their property, they have that privilege, they have that right, because they're in the same zoning district, and they'll be faced with the same challenge if they want to add to their existing home. So granting of this variance does not confer on the applicant any special privilege, because these are granted to anyone, any property owner within the zoning district that's subject to the site. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, I don't agree with you. You just take the word "not" out of your answer and just write the granting of the variance will confer on the owner a special privilege that is denied by code to the others. So it's just one word. You're arguing that it will not, and I'm arguing that it will. So I don't think it's clear is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
You're granting a variance that we probably would not grant to anyone else. So anyone else in that same district requesting the same thing, it's not automatically going to be them. So it would be a special granting of a variance to Mr. Stanton.
When it comes to granting variances, that's correct. You grant variance specific to a property owner.
Right.
But again, another property owner that wants to come forward and seek the same variance or seek the same relief would have to demonstrate why they need the variance for their particular property. So they may have different circumstances on their site that may be applicable. That will definitely be different from the situations that Mr. Stanton has on his property. So yes, I can agree to that.
Anybody on number 4?
So this really is your opinion. It's your opinion, and the board has a different opinion of that because
because I've been on the side of staff for 15 years, considering there are several variances where standards for variances are so difficult to demonstrate full compliance with and full hardships. In my opinion, if I was on staff's side and if I was in their seat, this is a classic case of a variance request whereby you have an existing structure and you're trying to expand on the existing structure, and the code is prohibitive and preventing you from doing that. So you go and you seek a variance to try and get that relief. There are several situations where I've come across where variances are either true hardships or not true hardships, where you may have a situation where a property owner acquired a piece of property with illegal structures on the site, and they're trying to seek a variance to remedy that. Is it their fault that it was constructed illegally? Did they purchase the property knowing it was illegally constructed? We don't know. So every property has its own special circumstance. And you weigh the options, and these criteria are pretty standard across the board. These 8 criteria, I can't tell you how many codes I have read, and these criteria are identical in the language that it contains. So it's such a gray area when it comes to these particular standards. I mean, you can ask any land planner that's been in practice doing variances, and they'll tell you that, yeah, it can be difficult to black and white comply and demonstrate how these criteria should be addressed. Of course, there will always be a difference of opinion, and it all boils down to what the consensus of the board is. So again, these criteria are so standard across the board. It's duplicative in several municipalities, and it can be challenging. But there are cases where variances are applicable, and in my opinion, this is one of those cases.
Okay. Let's go on with number 4, please.
Literal interpretation of the provisions of this code would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district under the terms of this code, and would work unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. So this particular standard is saying that if he's granted this particular variance, that other property owners would be deprived of the same, and that's not entirely true, because another property owner can indeed come and seek the same variance, and they would have to prove their case and show their hardships and show how they would comply with this particular standard. The undue hardship that would be put upon this particular property owner is the need to demolish only because of the structural strength, the need for that first floor wall to support the second floor component. And again, one of the issues here is the wider lot, forcing the greater setback from the first floor wall. If you have a much less, I guess, what's the right word? Lesser width lot, then the setback would be less. And maybe the case here would be that you can put some structural reinforcement to support that second floor component closer to the first floor wall. But that's not the case here. The setback is so great because of the wider lot, it's forcing us to seek this relief.
Excuse me, Trey or Greg, do you remember what the setback requirement is with the new frontage? Is it 28 feet?
Approximately.
Is it about 28 feet?
Yeah.
And if it could be 15 feet if we were measuring it off just the current home.
It's
Your
flexible.
point is,
That's
I
the
realize
delta.
it's
It's
really,
right.
really wide.
It's
Well, I'm just
flexible.
trying to get we agree that 28 feet is a big number. But if you were just looking at the current home there, it would probably be, I don't know, 15 feet or 12 feet or?
Probably less, because it's a percentage.
Correct.
It's a 100-foot lot, 15%
Okay, I
with
didn't
15
know the
feet.
width would be
That's the
like-
calculation, is
Right.
15%.
I
That's
don't-
why this is 190 feet, 15% of 190 is 28, that's the math.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, so 28 versus 15 tons.
the variance granted is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. So again, because of that existing first floor component, the first floor wall, and the structural integrity of that wall, this is the minimum variance that we're seeking, because that's the only place we can put the second floor wall in order to have the necessary support for the second floor.
Okay, good, keep going, please.
Okay, number 6, granting the variance would not permit to be established or reestablish any use prohibited in that zone district. Everything on this, as far as I know, everything on the site is conforming. There are no nonconformities. We're not seeking to add to any existing nonconformity, nor are we creating a nonconformity. So we'll stay in compliance with the code as far as uses or the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Number 7, granting the variance is consistent with the goals, objectives. I actually answered that before. And future land use map of the adopted comprehensive plan. So yes, we're not seeking to change anything that would be in conflict with your comprehensive plan. The use of a single-family home and don't remain a single-family home use in a single-family home district. And number 8, granting the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of this code, and that such variance will not be injurious to the area involved or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. I think Mr. Stanton has expressed quite a bit of justification when it comes to what exists on the adjacent property. And he's trying to remedy this situation by acquiring the property and making it now usable. And that would obviously prevent any future negative type of activities on the existing lot.
Okay, anybody have any other questions or comments? Nothing, no?
If I can just add one thing though on the public welfare, just in case it does become a question, which it may come up, I think it came up the last time at the meeting. There is significant landscaping along that eastern border, and as Mr. Hassan has shown, that would provide some significant buffers and screening of the component that would be added upon on the second floor. So there is no real impact, and as far as I know, based on conversations with Mr. Stanton as well, there was no opposition or no negative feedback from any of the adjacent property owners.
And Rita, we did contact the neighbor to the east. We didn't hear anything, no positive or negative, we didn't hear anything.
I understand that she did come in and look at the drawings.
Okay.
I was at lunch at the time, and so I did not speak directly with her, and she didn't leave any indication with any of the employees about yay or nay, and we've had nothing since.
Okay. Greg, do you have any comments? Trey, comments?
Well, if all the testimony and questions are complete, then, I think, you know, you guys need to discuss it.
Okay.
And if whichever way.
Sure, so the motions are in Mr. Dunn's staff report.
Mhm.
It says approve/deny, so if you want to approve, you just read those motions, finding that all the criteria have been met. If you decide to deny, that you would need to identify specifically a few of the criteria that you feel are not met for your recommendation to the town commission, so they can just see that there were specific findings and it wasn't just a blanket denial.
Can I go back to what you said about the town commission? So whatever decision is taken here, in terms of we discuss or we vote on, this goes to the town commission.
That's right, this is just the recommendation.
I want to understand the whole process through this.
Comparable to a level 3, it's just a recommendation to the commission to take final action on. So if you do have a few criteria that you believe are not satisfied, that will also give the applicant the opportunity to maybe address those next week at the town commission meeting.
Well, I find probably items 5 through 8 not specific to this property. I'm still struggling with numbers, maybe 1, 2, and 3, they're kind of run together, but I'm forgetting the cost of it. I think that we're asking for too large of a variance here, whether it be 15 feet or 28 feet. We've had feedback from other people in other neighborhoods that where a second-story wall is erected, it's forgetting the eyebrow, it goes up 2 stories as a flat wall. There's been really pushback, and I think everybody on this committee's gotten that pushback as well as the town itself. So I can't see, I can't see where we pass all 8 of these items. So my personal argument with, just as one member of the committee, would be that I don't agree with the answers to 1, 2, and 3, and I'm probably okay with 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
The one that I have an issue with is number 2, where you said, Mr. Stan, this is a do or don't choice, do or don't option, which to me is a choice, which states here is it's the choice of the applicant. That's the one that I have. I agree with the last 5, 2, and 2, 8. Point 3 was, as the chair discussed, it's a case of not granting. Somebody else would have to come and make their own case. We understand that everything is taken on its own merits, but it's number 2 that I have the problem with.
Do I have
to feel the same way, that, you know, the first 3 are a problem.
I think 1 and 2 are where I have the problems, because I don't see it as a true hardship, because there are alternatives, and not your alternatives, but there are alternatives. So that's where I have issue.
I would agree, especially I think number 2. I don't think number 3 was even an answer.
It just repeats the statement with a word not in it.
I do think the action of the applicant was the fact that he doubled the lot size, and I'm hanging my hat on that, so. I think 5 through 8, I would agree with the chair's opinion, that we pretty much agree that they're all fine.
Greg, in the discussion comments, there were 7, we have actually 7 options of the response, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Does anybody have those so they can read them? We can grant the application in full, we can deny the application in full, we can grant the application in part, grant the modification of the application in such a form that ARP deemed proper and consistent with the variance standards, establish such conditions that the committee deems necessary to ensure conformance, return the applicant to a recommending review authority, or continue the consideration. We're dealing with just really one really specific thing, and I think it would either be yes or no on the variance, not a whole list of things that we would be recommending. So if the application is just for the variance on the wall, then we really would either be granting it or denying it. Is that correct, Trey?
That's right.
Does anybody want to make a motion, or we want to continue, or do we want more information from the applicant?
I just want to reiterate that whatever the decision of this board, it goes, the applicant has the opportunity to present the same or modify again. They aren't tied to what they presented here. They can modify again in the light of this meeting.
Yes,
Is it
correct.
Okay. Right. In that case, I would like to make a motion to deny the application for a variance as presented today.
And you would need to identify the specific criteria that you're.
Okay, so you've got to accommodate all this. So it's presented today, and with reference to, concerning the 8 criteria that must be met, the board find that criteria 5 to 8 are met. Is that
before you take the final vote, do I have the ability to respond to criteria number 2? I know there's a motion on
Just
the
let
floor.
we're gonna make the motion first.
Yeah, and then get on, come back on that. Okay, so 5 to 8 are met. The criteria 1 to 4 are deemed not met by the board. I think that was our consensus across all 4.
Right.
Okay, so that's the motion, but.
No, okay, before we get a second, go ahead if you'd like to comment. No,
Okay,
wait
so-
wait a minute, we should have a second to the motion for this discussion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so now there's discussion.
Okay, so it sounds like there was a little bit of heartburn over standard number 2. And let's take for an example, if a property owner was to acquire a piece of property and was existing with the first, with a single-story home, and they wanted to expand on the home with a second floor component, my opinion would be that would not be the action of the applicant if they were here seeking a relief from the section of the code, because they purchased a home with the intent of adding on to the second floor. So we have an existing home. We have an existing home that's been constructed, and the intent here is to add to it. Understood that that's a decision that was made, and there's an option to keep the home the way it is, or add to it. And if the purchaser's intent was to add to it, they would be before you seeking the relief from the section of the code, and would not be the direct result of their action, because they purchased the home as a single-story home with the intent to add the second floor. So there's an existing condition here that was not the result of the applicant, and I think that's the intent of how this is read.
I think the action of the applicant is creating the condition. He's choosing to erect a second floor and a renovation. I don't think it's, I think it says, if you read it, the special conditions, circumstances do result from the actions of the applicant. They don't exist unless the applicant builds a second story. So I don't think they exist. That's where we're struggling with it. This is by choice. I mean, I think we've already said, I don't want to insult them, it's a beautiful home and it's beautifully designed. That's not what we're talking about. We're here to meet the standards, and we haven't strictly enforced this rule in the past as we are going forward. You're not the first person this has happened to. This isn't happening anymore. That happened for the last 2 years, I would estimate. So we think, I believe, speaking, that it is the actions of the applicant that's creating the circumstance, that it doesn't exist otherwise. That's number 2. Item number 2.
Is that the?
Any other discussion?
Not from the staff.
If not, Rita, you call vote.
Mr. Dougherty?
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Chairman Smith?
Yes. So we've denied, and it will go to the town. Greg or Trey, would you explain while they're here specifically what actions will take place so that we all know what happens from here going forward?
It's not necessary. We
You
won't
know.
do it. Yeah, we're not gonna purchase it, so. Right. Thanks.
Do I just take the USB just out?
Yeah, let's not adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, no, we have the meeting is adjourned.
Is the applicant withdrawing the application?
I have to talk to
Okay,
Mrs.
so
Santana.
if we could, just while this is pending, if we could just get a recommendation on all the other motions, because of the demolition, there's a level 3. We need the record to be clear as to the entire thing. Even though we were just here on the variance, we would need a complete record of those other motions. I apologize, everything was kind of, happening kind of fast.
But because
You would recommend denial
Denial across the
because
board.
the variance is.
because the variance is it's a pivotal part of the application.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And therefore, the others by default are denied.
But I think
Well,
Don't you
right,
we
we
need to
have
have-
motion to that
motions,
effect,
okay.
yes, sir.
Okay. In that case, I would like to make a motion to deny
demolition permits of an existing residential structure except for two walls.
I second that motion.
Is that still open for discussion from the applicant or the agent, or is there a motion closed?
I think,
My only
It's been moved and seconded,
well, being that if the if the property owner decides, not saying that I can't speak for him, he's not in the room anymore, but we had, as I understand, you have a site plan as well that you're trying to approve or make a recommendation onto the town commission. A motion to deny that if there's an option or an opportunity to redesign and push that structure back to comply, the variance goes away. And if there's consensus, right, if the consensus is that you guys like the building, et cetera, if the board is open to an alternate motion to recommend approval on the design of the home, we'd be more than welcome to receive that. Again, I can't speak for the applicant, I don't know if
I
he
think
would.
we want to recommend demolition permit. We'd hate to have demolition happen if it never is going to change the home. So I think that we would deny, that would obviously pass if you were to able to come up with a change that was acceptable to either the town commission or us. Then we're not going to block the denial of the demolition, but we don't want to approve it until.
And again, these are all just recommendations that are
Right.
going for final approval, so
Right.
if you decide that, if the applicant decides that he wants to change, modify it, step it back, some, to make it more attractive or meet the code, then that would continue to move forward to the town commission without the variance.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
So it was moved and seconded to deny the demolition permit. Rita, would you call the roll? Who's here?
Vice Chair Murphy,
yes.
Mr. Roach,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Smith.
Yes.
We've had the motion to deny the
Variance.
variance, therefore I'd like to make a motion to deny a level 3 architectural site plan based on the finding that the proposed construction of a Gulfstream Bermuda-style two-storey single-family dwelling with an attached four-car garage consisting of 11,988 square feet meet the minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards with the following conditions. 1. Any minor modifications to the existing landscaping should be submitted to the town manager for review and approval, and any major modification should be brought back to the ARPB for review and approval prior to the commencement of landscaping. 2. Prior to obtaining a building permit, the owner shall file a unity of title.
We need a second.
Second.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Roach, Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Smith.
Yes. Thank you. Is that confirmed
Yes,
what
thank
we
you,
need to
Chair.
do? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments from staff? Any other new business or old business? If not, our next meeting is